This is Lindsey at the Waverly Public Library. Welcome to February's DIY craft. We are doing cross stitching or embroidery stitching this week. So hopefully you are all able to pick up your kits, which was paid for by the Friends of the Waverly Public Library. So we really appreciate their support as always. So in the kit, you could have either chosen the bigger flower pattern. There was also a pattern with smaller flowers or a squirrel pattern. So most of those came with the same basic instructions. So I'm just going to walk you through those instructions and any of the stitches or knots that you may need to make to do this kit. Okay, so the one that I chose was this pattern with the bigger flowers. So luckily this pattern has all of the stitches that you would need, and on this instruction sheet you should see it'll kind of give you a map of what stitch you'll need where, what color, and how many strands you'll need. All right, so it'll tell you the stitch, which you can follow down here, or I will include some videos, some links to other videos that might be helpful too, in addition to watching this. So the stitch, and then this number to the left here is going to help you to know what color to use using this color palette. Okay, and then to the right there, it's going to tell you how many strands. All right, now to start off with, I'm going to show you how to do a French knot. All right, now in a normal embroidery thread, it's going to have 6 individual threads. Okay, so my pattern shows for most of my stitches and knots, I'm only going to need three threads. Okay, so you're going to separate however many threads you need very carefully. So 3 threads, and then slowly you're going to pull those apart. You want to do this slowly so that the threads don't knot. Okay, so just kind of pull it apart like so. Kind of have to hold on to that middle there. See, you don't want it to get knotted. You pull one end too, that will help. Now you're going to need a ruler and a scissors for this craft too. So you're only going to need about 18 inches for each, say, stitch you want to do. So using that ruler, I'm going to measure about 12, and then another 6 here. That's about right. And set that aside here. All right, now you're just going to thread this as like a normal needle, okay? It can be a bit tricky to get all of those individual strands through, but kind of work it through there, about like that. Okay, now you're gonna just leave one end a little shorter, and I'm going to start off with that French knot. Okay, so you're going to bring it up. I'm gonna do this flower right here in that middle. Okay, bring it up at the bottom of that inner circle, right there, and then pull it through. Make sure you leave about an inch or so, an inch length, so that you're not pulling it all the way through. Now for the French knot, you're going to make kind of a C with that left hand and bring the needle underneath that C, and then wrap it around twice. 1, 2. Okay, then tighten with your left hand. Okay, and you're going to bring that needle down. You're not going to bring it down the exact same spot, slightly higher than that. And then you're going to want to just keep that tension on that knot and bring it down to the end of that needle. Okay? And then keep that tension on, just like that, and then pull it through. And keep that tension with your left hand on there as you're pulling it through. Just like that, okay? It should look like a little knot. So then you're going to make another one up here. Bring it all the way through. And again, do the same thing. Make a C with your left hand. Bring this needle under, wrap it around twice. 1, 2, okay. And then bring it down again, slightly above where you brought that needle through. Keep that tension tight on the left hand. And as you pull it through, keep holding that left hand tight, okay? And pull it through. Okay. And basically fill in that pattern. Make a C, bring your needle under, 1, 2, and then bring it down, keeping that tension tight. All the way through, okay? Like that. All right, now once you're done filling in that pattern, you can cut off any excess thread, which you can use for another part of the pattern. 1, 2, and then bring it down. Okay, keep that tension tight. And pull it through. All right, that's looking good. So I'm going to cut off the excess, set that aside. Now I'm going to show you how to make the petals using the satin stitch. Okay. The satin stitch uses the kind of mustard yellow, I would call it. The satin stitch is pretty easy to do, so I kind of like it. The other thing you want to keep in mind, this pattern that is very helpful in this kit, it will wash off, okay? So don't get water near it until you want it to wash off. And don't get your hands wet while doing this. Okay, so slip that through. Now with the satin stitch, so you're going to start at the top, any petal you would like, okay? Now you're in, so start at that top point right there. And again, remember that this pattern, this will wash off, so don't worry if you're not following that pattern all the way exactly, okay? As you can see in parts of these stitches that I've done, I did not. So in this next stitch, you're going to come just below this first stitch that you made. Again, just following that pattern, okay? Doesn't have to be exactly below. So you see just nice straight lines. And I found that with these size of petals, you can use as many stitches as you like, but 3 for me usually worked pretty well. So that's what I'm going to use here. So you're just going to go up and then bring it down to the center, straight down. And again, should only need one more about. And then you're going to keep going around the flower. Using the same idea. Okay. And like I said, just keep going around in that same idea. Okay, until you've finished. It looks like that. Okay? Now for the stem stitch, it's actually not as hard as it might seem with the images on the instruction kit. Once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. So I'm going to use this right here to do my stem stitch. Okay, now you're going to come up from the back again. I'm just going to come up right through there. Okay. Again, pull it most of the way through, leaving 1 inch about in the back. All right, now we're going to come back down, slightly bigger stitch than you normally would. Okay, bring that down. As you pull it through, don't pull it through all the way, okay? I'll show you why in just a second. You're going to want a little bit of a loop. So pull it through a little more. All right, now you should come up about in the middle of that, okay? You should come up in between those 2 stitches that you made, okay? Just about like that. And then you're going to pull it all the way through, okay? Now you make a more normal size stitch, say right there. Bring that all the way through. And then you're going to come back up through that previous stitch. Okay, I'll show you a little better in this next stitch. And what I found too, making these stitches, you want to keep them about the same length. That makes it look a little neater. Also, you want to keep this looped thread at the same side of the thread, okay? Not on that side. All right, now if you leave a little bit of a loop, it makes it easier to see coming through that previous stitch, okay? Just like that, up through there. And then it's easier to see and you can just pull it straight through. All right, and then just keep going with that pattern. Leave a little bit of a loop so you can kind of see where you're going. And bring it all the way through. And this just makes it really look very neat. And you can see, if you can see, I'm holding my thumb at that loop as I'm pulling at that place where the thread is pulling through, so that I have some more control over that loop. I pulled that too much. But if you do, that's okay. You can just kind of see from the back there where you came up. That's why it's helpful to have that thumb in place to catch it a little bit. Also, as you're working, the thread could tangle or twist, I guess, a little bit. And that's okay. It's fairly easy to fix that. Just kind of let it hang free, and then it should unwind itself. So I'm almost done with this part. And then for those branches, I would say, you can just do basically a straight stitch with those, okay? I'll show you in just a second. And then this last stitch here, you're just going to come down and through. So you're at the back there. Okay, now find that first branch and just pull it straight through and then down. Try to kind of tuck it in to those stem stitches that you made. And then find that next branch. And so on and so forth. Up and through. The other reason to leave a little bit of excess, and also not to knot your thread when you first begin your stitches, so that if you would make a mistake there right at the beginning of your stitch, you could easily fix that by just taking out the stitches. And sometimes it gets a little knotted, and that just means that it's getting a little too twisted, okay? So I'm gonna need to let the thread kind of unwind in this next stitch. Okay. And sometimes the thread comes out too. If you're really struggling to get the threads through too, sometimes it helps to just cut off some of the ends too. All right, so one last stitch. So to kind of let it hang free a little bit and unwind, okay? So I'm just going to cut off that excess thread to be used later. And then I'll show you how to do the bullion knot. Okay, so for this particular knot is a little tricky. So if you're really struggling with this knot, you can always just use a satin stitch, which will be used for these smaller flowers on these other stems. But I think it's just good, something, a new stitch or knot to try. Okay, so if you like a challenge, I think that with enough practice, and anyone can do it, but it is a little trickier. Okay, so I've already started. I did 2 of these, okay, as samples. All right, so on this next one here, I'm going to come up here to give myself enough space, okay? So depending on how big you want your knot to be, that you can make your own decision with where you want to come up, okay? So about right there. So again, come up, and because I already started, I don't need to worry about pulling it all the way through. I can just pull it tightly. Now you're going to come down where you want that other end of the bullion knot to be. I want mine to be right about there. So I'm going to come down there. Now you don't want to pull it all the way through, okay? You're going to want to make sure that there's a loop. All right, and then you're going to bring your thread, your needle, up where you first came in, okay? Where you first came in. Okay. Oh. And okay. Here. We'll just start again. And again, okay. If you make a mistake, you can just turn this into a satin stitch, okay? Just go up and through, okay? That's what I'm going to do. All right, now let's try this one over here. All right, up and through, all the way through. If you're not starting, Okay. All right, then through that other end, however big you want your knot to be. Again, you don't want to pull that loop all the way through. You want some excess, and then come up through that first hole that you made. Okay, now this is important. Don't bring the needle all the way through, okay? Now you're going to wrap the left thread around as many times, so wrap it around. As many times, and then kind of smush it, okay? So that it's as tall about as wide, okay? And you can kind of just guess a little bit here. All right, so that looks about right to me. I'm going to grab it by my left pointer finger and thumb, and you don't want the thread to be too tight on the needle, okay? Now I'm going to pull, so once that's smushed down on the needle, I'm going to pull the needle through, okay? Keeping that, my pointer finger and thumb tight. I'm going to pull it all the way through. I know it's a little hard to see, okay? But you see, it's created this knot, okay? And then you're going to bring it down to where that second stitch was, okay? Down through where that second stitch was. And then just bring it tight, okay? Let's try that one more time, because I know this is tricky. Again, you can always use that satin stitch, which is going to be used on these other flowers if you would like. Okay, so bring it up on one end of the stitch and then down at that second point. Again, not pulling tightly. Make sure you have a loop. All right, and then bringing up on that first point. Not all the way through. Don't pull the needle all the way through. And then you're going to wrap it around. Until it's wrapped around, and then smush it until you think it's about the width of that first and second stitch that you made. And the thread could get a little tricky. Again, this knot is not that easy, so just be patient. It does take a little bit of practice, but it does look neat when you have it down. All right, I'm going to go one more time around, and then I'm going to make sure that thread is pushed down. Use my pointer and thumb finger to hold it on there, and then push the needle through. Keeping pointer finger and thumb in place, pull it all the way through, just like that. And then bring it through, the needle through on that second point, okay? Just like that. Okay? And you can keep going down the branch until you're done. Okay, now for the lazy daisy. So there are several lazy daisies that you're going to make. You can see the white one there. I did as an example. The petals are a little small, so that does make it a bit tricky, but it's kind of a fun stitch to do. Once you get the hang of it. Okay, thread your needle. Now for the orange one, I'm going to be working on this flower right here. I already did the French knot there. And so you're going to come up through that point, up through the points of all these different petals, all right? So starting all the way through. Remember, if you're starting that stitch, you're going to leave a 1/2 inch in the back there. Okay, don't knot it. I'm going to let it kind of untwist a little bit. There we go. Now you're going to actually bring it down about the same spot you came in. Okay, bring it back down so you're creating a loop a little bit. Now you're not going to want to pull that loop tight. You're going to want some of that loop, okay, at the end there. So pull it, make sure you have a big enough loop, and then you're going to come in at the very bottom of that petal, okay? All right, now the needle should come up in between those loops, okay, in the middle of them. And then pull it tight, but don't tighten it so much. You're going to need some of that, you're going to want some of that loop. Okay, that's going to be the petal. All right, that should be about right. Now to secure that petal, you're going to come just underneath that. And then you're going to pull it tight. And that secures the petal. Now you're just going to do that all around the flower, okay? Come up in that point all the way through, as long as you're not starting the stitch. And you're going to come back at that about same spot, okay? Now that again creates the loop, which you will want to keep. Okay, so keep pulling through, and then bring the needle back up at that top of that, at the bottom, right there, making sure that you're coming in the middle of that loop that you just created. Pull it tight, but not too tight. Again, your thumb can come in handy here. All right, maybe a little more. Try to make those petals as even as you can. And then secure it by coming just below the bottom of that petal, like that. And come up and then down at that same spot. Again, you want that loop there. Bring it in, up through the bottom. And then tighten. When you think the petal is about the same size, go ahead and secure it. make sure that that comes up in the middle, and I actually have that petal about the same, about the right size, so that's good. And if it doesn't match the pattern exactly, that's okay. At least from my perspective, it kind of adds some different character. And then just secure it. All right, then you can keep on finishing that pattern until you have a completed flower like that. Okay. Now for the back stitch, it's going to be green. Now all of my the number of strands needed was 3 for almost all of my stitches, except for the straight stitch, which will only be 2. Okay, so for the back stitch, the instructions actually I found kind of confusing, but watching the video really helped me. So I'm going to start over here, actually, and I've done a little bit of the back stitching, you can see, but I will walk you through it. Okay, so you're going to come up at the bottom there, bring it all the way through, leaving that last inch. Okay, now you're going to bring it down, just following that pattern. All right, and then you're going to bring it back up about the same stitch length away, pull it all the way through, and then you're going to go back, okay, the back stitch. So you're going to go back through that previous loop, okay? And then you're going to bring your needle up to that next stitch point, up through that next stitch point, okay? And then all the way through, and just pull that. Okay? Again, going to go down through that previous stitch, and then bring it up. Down through that previous stitch, and then bring it through there. So once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. Okay. But it is a little confusing at first. All right, now to end it, you're at the top there, so you're going to bring it down again through that previous stitch. Okay, just like that. For the leaves are a satin stitch, so we're going to keep practicing on the back stitch. up, all the way through, back down. And then on this next stitch, when you come back up, you're going to go back and then bring the needle through like that. And this is actually a fairly fast stitch too, so I kind of like it now. And it just makes for a nice, neat stitch, really. Okay, and that's all there is to it. And to finish, you're just going to go back and then cut off excess thread. And that's all. That is the back stitch. Okay. Now for the fishbone stitch, this one is you can see I did a sample here. It's kind of an interesting look, which I really like, and it isn't too hard to learn. So, and with you may have received different patterns, so you might not even have to know all of these stitches, which is fine. But I kind of wanted to give you all an idea of what those stitches looked like. Okay, so for the fishbone stitch, so for this leaf, I'm going to come up at that tip, okay? Again, leaving that inch in the back, all right? Now for this first stitch down, I'm going to maybe make it a little longer than I normally would, okay? All right, and you know, on that first stitch, if you by chance do happen to pull that thread all the way out, that's okay. It's just starting back up again. Okay, so then you're going to bring your needle up this next, either left or right, it doesn't really matter, but you're just going to do that, bring it up just slightly below where you came in, just basically following that pattern. Okay, pull it tight, and then you're going to bring this down just a little bit lower than that stitch in the middle. Okay, and then you're going to go up the other side. Again, just following that pattern, okay? And bring it back to the center there, just a little lower. And follow that pattern to the right and then to the center. You are just going to be going up either side and then back down to the center always. Okay, so eventually it will look like a leaf. Okay. And then you're just going to finish and cut off any excess. Now the last stitch is the simplest stitch, which is good. So for this straight stitch, you are just going to use 2 strands and okay. And the only place the straight stitch is needed actually is in the center flower, okay? So you're just going to go up where those French knots are, and then a straight stitch is exactly what it sounds like. Okay? Just following that pattern. Pretty simple. And again, you don't need to follow the pattern exactly. You can kind of make up your own pattern a little bit here and there. Okay. And there's that. Okay, so that is the February DIY craft. I hope you enjoy it, have fun. I hope to see you next month for the spa DIY day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.